My son said, "It's not personal, Mom. We just don't have space for you anymore." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like telling me to leave my own house was a kind, necessary act. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with the slow, quiet sound of something breaking that had been held together for too long. I raised this boy. I gave him everything. And now here he was, standing in the kitchen I built, telling me I needed to go. I could have made a scene. I could have cried, begged, collapsed into the antique chair I spent a whole summer sanding and staining. But I didn't. I just smiled, nodded, and asked how soon they needed me out. You might think I'm exaggerating. That surely no one would tell their mother to leave her own home just before Thanksgiving. But I swear to you, that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't just what they said, it was how they said it. "Mom," David started, avoiding my eyes, fingers tugging at the end of his sleeve like a guilty boy caught in a lie. That was always his tell since he was little. Emily's parents, they're getting older too, and their situation is more complicated. They're moving in with us for a while. Complicated. What did that even mean? I wanted to ask, but I kept quiet. He glanced toward the kitchen, the same space where I had spent decades cooking, cleaning, listening to stories about his school days, heartbreaks, dreams. The same kitchen where he took his first steps, holding onto my apron. He didn't say thank you for any of it. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't even ask how I felt. "There just won't be enough space," he continued, voice softer, like he was delivering news about a neighbor moving away. "Maybe you could stay with Aunt Cheryl for a bit?" Aunt Cheryl. 1 bedroom. 3 cats. A broken radiator. He knew that. But he said it anyway. Like it was a good solution. He said it with a tone that told me the decision was already made. He had thought it through. I wasn't being consulted, I was being informed. That hurt more than anything. Emily walked in then, carrying a dish towel, wiping invisible spots from her hands. She smiled like we were discussing a bake sale. "Your pies smell amazing, Margaret." Just like always. Margaret. Not Mom. Not even Grandma. Just Margaret. Like I was the woman from church who brings a dessert to potluck. "We really appreciate everything you've done," she added. That voice she uses when she wants something to sound sweet. This has been such a blessing. But my parents, they're not as adaptable as you are. They need more care. Adaptable. That word landed like a slap. It was a polite way to say, you can manage on your own. They can't. So you go. Never mind that I'd helped Emily when she broke her wrist, drove her to her job interviews, picked up their groceries during lockdown. Never mind that I let them turn my home office into a nursery. Now, I was too much. "So, how soon did you want me to leave?" I asked. I kept my voice steady. My hands didn't shake. But inside, it felt like the floor dropped out from under me. David blinked. "We were hoping by Sunday evening. That way we can have the guest rooms ready before Thanksgiving." Sunday. 3 days. Just like that, I was on a countdown to eviction. They didn't ask if I had anywhere to go. They didn't ask how I felt. They didn't even pretend to feel bad. They just assumed I'd go quietly. Because I always did. Emily chimed in again, as if she were doing me a favor. "Of course, we'll help you pack. We want this to be easy for you." Easy. As if betrayal could be boxed up and moved. I nodded, said thank you. And then I climbed the stairs slowly, my legs aching, my heart heavier than it had been in years. Each step felt like I was walking away from a life I no longer recognized. I passed the photos on the wall, David's graduation, Emily holding their baby, the family portrait from last year that I paid for. I stared at the smiles, frozen in time, and all I could think was, none of it was real. Not to them. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed. The bed frame my husband and I bought the year we moved in. He sanded it, I stained it. We built this house together. Brick by brick, year by year. Now they wanted me to leave it behind. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I looked around. The scent in the house had changed. Her candles, not mine. Vanilla bean, not cinnamon. My blankets were gone from the living room. My cups were replaced with sleek new ones that matched her aesthetic. Even the garden I planted had been rearranged. My hydrangeas replaced by petunias. Bit by bit, they had erased me. And I let them. David had forgotten the winters I worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. The nights I stayed up with him when he had a fever. The sacrifices. The dreams I let go of so he could chase his. I had covered his debts. Paid his rent once. Co-signed his car loan. And now? I was in the way. I took out my notebook and wrote. 1. Call lawyer. 2. Pack only what matters. 3. Lock the downstairs wine cabinet. Because here's the truth they didn't know, the house was still in my name. I let them believe otherwise. Let them paint the walls, host their friends, talk about our home as if I wasn't the one who made it possible. But I never gave it away. Not legally. I folded the paper, placed it inside the old recipe tin where I kept things I didn't want anyone else to find. Then I walked to the closet, opened the suitcase I hadn't used in years, and started to pack. Just the essentials. The pie downstairs still smelled like home. But it wasn't mine anymore. And I wouldn't be serving it to them. Not this year. Not ever again. They would enjoy their Thanksgiving. They'd smile, laugh, take pictures, maybe even post something online about gratitude and family. And I would be gone. Quietly. Completely. Just like they wanted. But what they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was that I had one last move left. Because I may be old. I may be tired. But I'm not helpless. Not by a long shot. The silence in my room didn't feel peaceful, it felt heavy. Thick. Like the air itself was trying to press me into the floor. I didn't cry that night. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I was past tears. I had spent a lifetime swallowing pain. This was just another dose. A little more bitter, maybe. A little colder. I sat by the window in my bedroom, watching the wind twist the branches of the old maple outside. The same tree David used to climb when he was little. He'd get stuck halfway up and call for me. And I always came. Always. That word haunted me, always. I was always there. Always on time. Always ready to help. Always listening. Always covering the bills. Always putting myself last so he could be first. And now, I was in the way. That truth settled into my bones like winter. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, not for warmth, but to feel something around me. Something that belonged to me. I thought about the way Emily had smiled when she said they'd help me pack. Like she was being generous. Like she didn't understand she was pushing me out. The same woman I had driven to the emergency room when she slipped on the icy porch. The same woman I'd cooked for after she gave birth to my grandson while David was off working late. She used to call me Mom. That stopped after they moved in. Now I was Margaret. A guest in my own home. A name, not a role. And David, my son. My only child. He didn't fight for me. He didn't defend me. He didn't even hesitate. He just looked at me and said it was time to go. It's not personal. That's what he said. Not personal. But everything about it was personal. Every word. Every look. Every quiet choice they had made over the past year. They had been preparing for this. I saw it now. The way they gradually boxed up my things. The way my chair disappeared from the living room. The way my framed photos ended up in drawers. The way they stopped inviting me to sit with their friends when they had guests over. At first, I thought they were just busy. Then I thought maybe I was imagining things. But no. They were clearing the space. Erasing me. And I let them. Because I believed, foolishly, that if I kept being useful, I'd stay needed. That if I stayed quiet, they'd remember how much I mattered. I thought love meant being patient. Being generous. Being steady. But now I saw the truth. Love isn't earned by shrinking yourself. That night, I lay in bed and let the memories flood in. David's first broken heart, how he crawled into bed beside me and cried. His first job interview, how I sat up all night helping him practice. The time I emptied my savings so he wouldn't lose his apartment after he lost that job. The time Emily forgot her wallet at the grocery store, and I paid without saying a word. The day their baby was born and I cleaned the house top to bottom before they came home. No one asked me to. No one thanked me either. But I did it. Because I loved them. I didn't need fanfare. I didn't need applause. But I thought, at the very least, they'd remember. They didn't. I stood up and walked to the bookshelf. My fingers grazed the spines of books I had read to David at bedtime. Still there. Still waiting. Unlike me. I opened a drawer and found the birthday cards I'd saved over the years. Most were from friends. A few from neighbors. Only 3 from David in the last 10 years. Short and signed. One of them wasn't even addressed to me. It just said, "Thanks for everything." Everything. Like my whole life was a background service. I felt something twist in my chest. Not grief. Not anger. Just finality. They saw me as the help. The scaffolding. The extra room. But I am not extra. The next morning, I made coffee like always. 1 scoop less. Just for me now. I didn't wait for anyone to join me at the table. I didn't expect conversation. David passed by with a stack of laundry. "Morning," he said. No smile. No eye contact. "Morning," I replied. He kept walking. I wanted to ask him, "Do you realize what you're doing? Do you even care?" But I didn't. Because I already knew the answer. He thought I would never leave. That I had nowhere else to go. That he could take and I'd still stay. Emily came down later, holding their baby. She kissed his head and sat at the kitchen counter with a yogurt. "I was thinking we should move the high chair into your room after you leave," she said casually. "It'll give us more space in the dining room." More space. She didn't look at me when she said it. She just stared at her phone, scrolling through pictures or emails or whatever filled her world more than the woman in front of her. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I helped raise, in a way. The woman I welcomed into my home. The woman I defended when David complained about her spending. The woman now deciding where to put a high chair in the space that was still mine. "Sounds good," I said. Because what was the point in arguing? They didn't want a conversation. They wanted silence. They didn't want a mother. They wanted vacancy. And now, they would get it. But not the way they expected. Later that day, I drove to a small apartment complex on the edge of town. I hadn't been there in a while. Not since I quietly purchased it 2 years ago, after David and Emily started making long-term plans in our house. I walked through the unit. It was small but warm. Clean. Paid off. Mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. I sat on the couch and closed my eyes. There was no baby crying. No one asking for help. No one taking things without asking. Just me. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "I'm ready to sell the house," I said. He hesitated. "You're sure?" "Yes. The papers are in my name. Let's move quickly." And we did. I didn't tell David or Emily. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't even hint. They wanted me out. So I left. And I took the house with me. But before I went back home to start quietly packing, I drove to the cemetery. My husband's grave was tucked beneath an old oak tree. I stood there for a long time. "You'd be disappointed in him," I said aloud. I think I was too. For a long time. But I didn't want to see it. I thought if I just kept giving, he'd eventually give back. The wind rustled the dry leaves at my feet. I felt a strange peace standing there. Like I had finally said what needed to be said. Back home, I started boxing up my things. Not everything, just what mattered. My books. My photos. The quilt my mother made. The pie dish I'd used every Thanksgiving since David was born. I labeled the boxes carefully. Not for anyone else's benefit. Just for mine. It felt good to reclaim a little control. David walked in halfway through. "You're already packing?" I looked up. "You said you needed the space." He looked uncomfortable. "You didn't have to rush. We could have helped." I nodded. "You said Sunday. I'll be gone by then." He stood there, quiet. Maybe waiting for me to say more. But I didn't. He turned and left. I finished packing that evening. I didn't eat dinner with them. I didn't say goodnight. The next morning, I moved into my apartment. Alone. Peacefully. And the sale of the house went through 2 days later. They found out when the realtor called to schedule the final walkthrough. And suddenly, they realized what they had lost. But by then, I was gone. Gone, but not broken. Not bitter. Just done. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. The weather had turned overnight. Cold rain tapped at the windows, slow and steady. I sat at the small kitchen table in my new apartment, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea. The silence was no longer heavy. It was clean. There was no background noise of a baby crying. No cupboard slamming. No forced small talk. It was just me, the ticking of a small wall clock, and the soft patter of rain. I hadn't told David or Emily where I moved. They didn't ask. They didn't check in. For 2 whole days after the realtor's call, there was silence. Not even a text. I had expected at least confusion. Maybe a call from David asking what happened. But nothing. That silence told me everything. I had made the right choice. Still, even in this new space, some part of me itched with the need to explain. To justify. To make them understand the pain behind my decision. But then I thought back to all the times I tried to communicate my feelings before. The ignored comments. The polite nods. The way Emily always changed the subject. The way David checked his phone instead of meeting my eyes. They didn't want to hear me then. They didn't deserve my words now. That morning, I logged into my bank account and started making quiet changes. The recurring transfer I'd set up for their grocery budget, gone. The automatic payments for their car insurance, canceled. The extra payment toward their credit card, the one David always forgot was in my name, removed. One by one, I erased myself from their lives. Not loudly. Not with bitterness. Just undone. I checked the mail later that afternoon. In the stack was a thank you card from a former neighbor, one I used to help get to her doctor's appointments. She'd moved across the country to be with her daughter, but hadn't forgotten me. Inside the card was a simple note: "You made my life easier in a time when everything felt hard. I hope someone is doing the same for you now." That letter made me cry. Not because it was sad, but because it was real. Because it saw me. I set it on the counter and took a long breath. I hadn't realized how starved I was for kindness. For honesty. For someone to see my effort and say, "I remember." Back in the house, it had always been invisible work. Food that appeared. Bills that vanished. Repairs that just got done. And me? I was expected to fade behind it all. It reminded me of another time, something I hadn't thought about in years. I was 19 when my father told me to leave. I had spoken back for the first time. Just once. He didn't like that. "If you think you're so grown up, go live like it," he said, and shut the door behind me. I had nowhere to go. No money. But I left anyway. Slept on a friend's couch. Found work. I survived. But I told myself I'd never do that to my child. Never make them feel small just for having needs. So I overcompensated. I gave David everything. And now? He used the same words on me in a different tone. "We just don't have space for you anymore." I paid for everything. But they still asked me to leave. The difference was, this time, I had somewhere to go. Because I had prepared. Quietly. Carefully. And this time, I had a choice. I could have yelled. I could have exposed every debt, every selfish decision, every ungrateful word. But I chose to remain silent for my son. Because nothing I said would change their hearts. But my absence? That would speak volumes. The day after the house sold, David finally called. I didn't answer. He called again. Then Emily. Then a few texts came through. "We need to talk. There's been some kind of mistake. Please call us back." Mistake. As if they hadn't spent months making it clear I didn't belong. As if pushing me out was a misunderstanding, not a decision. I let the messages pile up. I read each one slowly, carefully. There were no apologies. No ownership. Just confusion. Just panic. That evening, I baked a small apple crisp, just for me. No one to please. No one to critique the sugar. No one to ask for seconds without saying thank you. The smell filled the apartment, warm and simple. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had done something just for myself. The next day, Emily left a voicemail. Her voice was sharper this time. "We don't understand what's going on. The realtor said you sold the house. That can't be right. We need to talk. Call me." Need. They only needed me when something broke. When something cost money. When something needed covering. But no one ever wanted me. That was the difference. And I saw it clearly now. I deleted the voicemail. By the end of the week, a letter from their lender arrived, forwarded to my new address by mistake. It was a late payment notice on a loan David had taken out, using my name as a cosigner. I hadn't even known about it. My hands trembled as I read the letter. But not from fear. From resolve. I made a copy, drafted a statement to the credit agency, and called my lawyer. It was time to start clearing my name. They had assumed I'd never push back, that I'd keep covering their trail no matter what. They were wrong. Later that evening, I received a group text. A photo of the family at dinner, Emily's parents included. A smiling caption, "First Thanksgiving in our new space." No mention of me. Not even a tag. They had moved on quickly. Or at least, they wanted me to think they had. But what they didn't know is that their new space wasn't fully theirs. Not legally. Not for long. The fine print in the sale agreement required them to vacate within 30 days or face steep penalties. They hadn't read it. But I had. And in 2 more weeks, that photo would be a memory taken inside someone else's house. Mine. I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted quietly. To peace. To freedom. To finally choosing myself. Because this time, I wasn't the one outside in the cold. They were. And I was not going to let them back in. The following morning, I woke up to another voicemail, David's voice this time, tense and clipped. "Mom, I don't know what's going on. Can you please just talk to me? We're really confused." He didn't say he missed me. He didn't say he was sorry. Just that he was confused. That's all I'd ever been to them in the end. A fixture. A convenience. Something to keep the lights on, but never someone to be held on to. And now? Now I was gone. For good. I brewed another cup of tea, stood at the window, and watched the sky lighten. Somewhere out there, they were waking up to a reality they created. And I was watching the rain from a window that belonged only to me. The first real crack came on a Monday. Emily showed up at my building. I saw her through the peephole. She was pacing, holding her phone in one hand, arms crossed tight. She looked nervous. Not angry yet. Just unsettled. Like she had knocked on 3 or 4 doors before realizing none of them were going to open for her. I didn't open mine either. She stood there for a few minutes, checked her phone, knocked again, sharper this time, and finally walked away. I didn't watch her leave. I just sat back down at the kitchen table and returned to my crossword puzzle. The apartment was quiet. Peaceful. The voicemail came an hour later. "Hi Margaret, it's Emily. I'm just really confused about what's going on. We didn't mean for things to get like this. Can you call me back?" She didn't say sorry. Not once. Not for the way she had spoken to me. Not for the decisions they made. Not for telling me they were moving my things out before I'd even agreed to leave. Just confusion. They always called it confusion when they didn't want to admit guilt. 2 days passed. Then David called again. "Mom," he said, "you can't just disappear like this. We're trying to understand what happened." What happened? I wanted to laugh. What happened was months of erasure. What happened was every time they treated me like a burden instead of a mother. What happened was they asked me to leave, and I did. I didn't return his call. By Friday, the tone shifted. Emily's text came in sharp and direct. "Did you really sell the house without telling us? We had plans, Margaret. You didn't even think of what that would do to us." And there it was. No mention of what they had done to me. No apology. Just blame. As if I'd burned something down, instead of walking away from the slow fire they had lit months ago. They had plans. But I had been erased from those plans. Now they were the ones scrambling. The next morning, Emily called again. This time, her voice cracked, but it wasn't from sadness. It was sharp, almost venomous. "You've put us in a terrible position. You knew we were relying on that house. You knew my parents just moved in. What are we supposed to do now? Where are we supposed to go?" I listened to it once, calmly. Then I played it again. Her voice wasn't the voice of someone grieving a relationship. It was the voice of someone angry that her safety net had finally snapped. An hour later, David sent a message. "I can't believe you'd do this without telling us. I thought you were better than that." Better than that? I gave him everything. My savings. My support. My time. And now I was suddenly beneath his expectations because I acted without his permission? Even Emily's parents chimed in an email this time, from her mother, pretending to be polite but seething between the lines. We've been trying to settle in, and this abrupt decision of yours has caused considerable disruption. We're very disappointed in how you've handled this. Disappointed. As if I was a child who had misbehaved. As if it wasn't them who stood silently as I was shoved aside. Let them be disappointed. Let them stew. Emily sent another message a day later. It was long, accusatory, and filled with lines like, "You've shattered the family. How could you be so cold? And we'll never forgive this." I read every word. I didn't respond. David tried one last time in a voicemail. "Mom, this is serious now. We might have to break the lease on the new place. My in-laws are scared. You've put us in a terrible bind. Please, for the baby, just talk to us." Even then, even as the walls closed in around them, he couldn't admit what they had done. He could only try to guilt me with the idea of the baby, as if I had left a child on a doorstep. I heard from a friend in the neighborhood that a "for rent" sign had gone up on the front lawn. The family who bought the house wasn't going to wait for them to get comfortable. They were eager to move in. Suddenly, all the things they'd taken for granted, space, comfort, control, were gone. And I felt nothing. No joy. No triumph. Just silence. That weekend, David left a longer message. His voice cracked halfway through. "I thought you'd always be there. I didn't realize how much you were doing. I know we made mistakes. I don't know how to fix this." I sat with that message for a long time. I played it twice. Then a third time. Still, no apology. Just the vague shape of regret, wrapped in self-pity. They weren't sorry they hurt me. They were sorry I stopped letting it happen. I never replied. Then came the emails. One from Emily, longer, more formal. "We want to sit down and talk. For closure. For the baby's sake. We think it would be best if we cleared the air." Closure. I had closed the door. I had locked it. And I was not interested in reopening it for their convenience. Everything in that email was centered around their needs. The baby, the stress, the confusion. Not once did it ask how I was doing. Not once did it mention what they had said to me. Not once did it acknowledge that they told me, clearly, calmly, that I needed to leave. They were acting like I had overreacted to a misunderstanding. But I hadn't. I had simply obeyed. They said they didn't have space for me. So I made space for myself. One afternoon, I walked by a small bookstore near my building and saw a flyer for a community potluck. I hadn't been to anything like that in years. But I went. I brought a pie. Sat next to a retired teacher and a woman who'd just moved after her divorce. We talked. We laughed. I felt seen. No one asked me for money. No one judged my quiet pauses. No one expected me to be invisible. Afterward, one of the organizers came up to me and said, "You have a very calming presence. We're lucky you came." That night I cried. For the first time since leaving the house. Not because I missed them, but because I finally realized how long it had been since someone wanted me around, just for being me. And meanwhile, the messages kept coming. "David, can we talk before the holidays? It doesn't feel right without you. Emily, the baby asks about you. He misses you. David again, I'm sorry. I mean that. But it was too late. I had given them years. They gave me a deadline. And now I was done. And then something happened I didn't expect from myself. I spent Thanksgiving at a neighbor's apartment. We watched old movies and shared leftovers. We weren't related, but we were kind to each other. And that mattered more. Let them sit with the silence I left behind. Let them fill it with whatever they thought I owed them. I owed myself peace. And for the first time, I had it. The first Christmas card arrived in early December. Not from David. Not from Emily. Not even from someone I used to consider family. It was from a nurse I had helped care for during her recovery 5 years ago. She had moved across the country, yet she still had my address. The card was simple. Snow-covered trees, a handwritten note inside. "Thank you for being there when I needed kindness most. You changed my life more than you know." That one note held more warmth than anything I had heard from my own son in years. It wasn't until the week before Christmas that Emily broke her silence again. This time it came through a letter. The envelope was thick, hand-addressed, and arrived with a scrawl that felt rushed. Inside was a 4-page letter, each line an attempt to explain or manipulate. She wrote about the stress they'd been under, about her parents needing help, about how David was stretched too thin, how they never meant to hurt me, that they were just overwhelmed and assumed I understood. Assumed. That was always the word. They assumed I would keep giving, keep folding, keep stepping aside. They never asked if I wanted to stay. They just cleared space. Halfway through the second page, she shifted tone. She began asking questions. Was selling the house really the only option? Couldn't you have waited until after the holidays? Couldn't we have talked first? As if now I owed them a warning. As if they hadn't made every decision without me for months. She ended with one sentence that made my throat go dry. You were always the strong one. I guess we assumed that meant you didn't need anything. I stared at that line for a long time. Not because it was profound, but because it showed just how blind they had been. Strength doesn't mean invincibility. I needed love. I needed space. I needed to be seen, not as the provider, not as the extra room, not as the wallet, but as a human being. And they hadn't seen that. David didn't send a letter. He sent a gift. It was a photo book, one of those printed albums filled with pictures of the baby. Captions in neat handwriting. First steps, first Halloween, first word, Dada. And in the very back, a message. We miss you. The baby needs you. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I understand now. Just need. Always need. I put the photo book away. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. That was the moment I understood the difference between letting go and giving up. I wasn't giving up on them. I was letting go of what I had imagined they could be. Letting go of the version of David that had once held my hand as a boy. Letting go of the dream that someday they'd see all I had done. I no longer needed them to acknowledge my pain to feel it was valid. It had always been valid. Even in silence. On Christmas Eve, I lit a single candle in the window of my apartment. I made a plate of roasted vegetables and a small pie. No gifts. No chaos. No performance. Just peace. I thought that would be the end. But 2 days later, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a small framed photo. It was of me, taken years ago at a community fundraiser. I was standing at a table of food, laughing with someone off camera. A post-it note was stuck to the frame. You probably don't remember me. But I remember you. You made that day bearable. Thank you. That photo broke something open in me. All this time, I had measured my worth through sacrifice. Through staying silent. Through being the dependable one. The selfless one. The forgotten one. But these strangers, these people whose lives I had touched in passing, they remembered. They saw me. And suddenly, I didn't feel invisible anymore. The messages from David slowed. Emily stopped writing. The silence grew, but this time it wasn't painful. It was clean. Final. I began volunteering at the library twice a week. I joined a small book club. I even signed up for a watercolor class, something I hadn't done since my 20s. And little by little, my world became full again. Not loud. Not demanding. Just quietly full. I kept the 2 thank you notes on my fridge. Not out of pride, but as a reminder that I matter. That even when family forgets you, the world can still offer grace. I didn't go back. I didn't explain. I didn't write a final letter. Because some stories don't need closure. They just need to end. And this one did. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, remember this. You don't have to earn a place in someone's life. You already deserve one in your own. Age isn't about weakness. It's about dignity. And I'm finally living mine.